America first and global conflict next. An isolationist Trump administration may see the wide oceans to east and west. The historical record is clear. Protectionism, isolationism, and America first policies are a recipe for economic and military disaster. Dr. Roubini, wonderful to have you with us. Is it a zero-sum administration? Will it be a zero-sum 2017?
Well, Ian Brabham and I a few years ago wrote an article about a G0 world where people are thinking about the world as being a zero-sum game. Unfortunately, if the U.S. gives up on his multilateralist, internationalist approach, he's going to think about his own strict national interest, and that's going to create a variety of tensions, certainly in economic foreign policy. There is already a backlash against trade, against globalization,
right,
against migration, and that's going to be worsened by the U.S. policy. There is a risk of trade and currency wars. That's one dimension of it. And then there is the geopolitical dimension of it. In the 20s and 30s, the U.S. became America first, isolationist, unilateralist,
right,
and that led to the rise of aggressive power like Germany and Japan, and then war.
You've worked in Washington with the Clinton administration ages ago.
Yeah.
Do you have a belief that there are checks and balances in place to assuage, to lessen, to diminish your concerns about a Trump administration?
Well, there are checks and balances on domestic policy because we have Congress, we have judiciary, Supreme Court, regulatory agencies. But as we know, the U.S. President has more power on migration, on trade, on foreign policy, on security. And on those areas, the Trump administration might go in direction, might become increasingly dangerous for the U.S. and the world economy.
Professor Roubini, if I look back and think about the 1930s into the 40s and then what the world looked like after that period, I'm trying to understand kind of what's the best sort of way of understanding this. Because we live in a nuclear world now, and I'm just wondering whether mutually assured destruction still works, whether all those kind of Cold War theories can be applied to this new world in which you talk about.
Well, certainly there is a risk that eventually, if we become more unilateralist, there is a global conflict. And the difference between World War II and now is that there is a rising number of powers that are becoming nuclear. I mean, if the U.S. gives up on Europe and its allies, you're going to have Russia on one side becoming more aggressive in Ukraine, in the Baltics, in the Balkans, in the Middle East, at a time where Europe and the Eurozone is in the process of disintegration. My biggest worry is that Le Pen is going to come to power in France and the anti-Euro Cinque Stelle in power in Italy.
Dr. Bremer? I mean, that's really, Guy Johnson has this front and center.
I certainly think that the potential of Cold War is very low, but part of the reason for that is because you're not going to see bloc behavior, right? And when the Cold War happened, the United States had all these allies that was with the U.S. Clearly, Trump is setting up for a U.S.-China confrontation that won't be very well managed. But American allies in Asia are looking at the United States and saying, this is not a safe route for us. We have to rely on ourselves, and we're going to have to work more closely with the Chinese economically. Traditional allies in the U.S. and the Middle East are also going to be a problem.